In your backyard?
Hi. Oh, it's okay.
Rabbits?
Maybe. No, we have a fence.
Oh.
Now if it's a tiny rabbit or a little bird.
Yeah. Thank you.
No.
Don't steal your pen.
Thank you, sir. Much
I think
appreciated.
we're live.
All right.
Thanks.
Excellent.
You don't happen to have a
Well,
pen
good
back
evening,
there, do
all.
you?
Thank you for coming here tonight. We are live and ready to go. We are being recorded, and I want to say thank you all for showing up tonight at our town hall meeting. First of all, I want to acknowledge the hard work that Deputy Mayor Jensen has put into working with staff, working with me, and putting all this together. At 5 o'clock, I was still in the office at City Hall, and I called him and I said, hey, 5:30, and he's like, yes, I'm helping put seats together. So thank you for all the work that you have done. So the topic, of course, is talking about our roads and talking about the report that staff has provided to us with regards to the needs that we have in our community, and how are we going to get to the place where we have the roads that everybody desires to have. We currently have a score of a 50 to 55, which is an F. If you consider it from a grade school average, 100 to a 0. And we have a plan. Jensen and I, Deputy Mayor Jensen and I, since we started working on the city council, we're talking about, let's not just talk about the CIP and the CIB, let's take a real look at how much it would take for us to get our roads for our constituents the way that we would like to have them. And just as expected, the numbers were a bit grueling. We're talking everywhere from a $336 million necessity in order to get the roads the way that we would like to have them, to the right PCI, which is Pavement Condition Index, which is the grading scale that I discussed earlier, to $268 million. And that is where the impetus came about of us discussing the possibility of increasing the sales tax to 1/4. That 1/4 would add an additional $7 million that will go directly into these road projects. Now, before we get started, and I pass it on to Deputy Mayor and, of course, to the city manager and our staff, Dr. Jason Peak, I want to say thank you to the individuals that sent correspondence prior to this meeting. Spencer Duncan, Betty Phillips, Webb Garlinghouse, Will Nicklin, and past Mayor Joan Wagner. I want to ensure all of you that all the information that I have received from you is not only here in front of me, but I have already also spoken with Dr. Peak to ensure that all of the questions that are being asked of us are provided to all of you on the website so that you have all the information that you're requesting as an answer. So without further ado, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So briefly, what I'd like to do is sort of set some expectations for what we want to accomplish here tonight. First and foremost, we can't change the past. We can only learn from it. I know there's a lot of concern about what we've done in the past with sales tax money, and all we can do is learn from what we didn't do right, what we could do better, and that sort of thing. So my hope tonight is let's focus on the future. Let's talk about how we want to get where we want to be, and not necessarily dwell on where we've been. We know there's been some mistakes made, that we didn't necessarily handle some of that the way folks would have liked, but at the end of the day, we can't change that. All we can do is do better in the future. So as you bring your thoughts and comments forward, I would encourage you to look toward the future and not dwell on the past. First and foremost, we want to have a conversation about what quality of roads you want. You know, we've talked about the fact that our roads have an F right now. We've had decades of maintenance issues where we weren't able to get them to the level we needed them to be. So let's talk about what we want. You know, do we want complete streets? Do we want sidewalks on the roads where appropriate? Do we want to look at, does a road need to be widened instead of just repaired? There's a lot of infrastructure under some of these roads, and do we want to talk about, you know, maybe the funding from those comes from a different pool of money, and do we want to talk about, should we use some of the sales tax money to repair that infrastructure now rather than put the road on hold even though it desperately needs to be repaired while the money becomes available to fix the lines underneath of it? Things along those lines. You know, another question to bring up is how long is the community willing to wait for some of these roads to be fixed? You know, if the intent is to do everything in 10 years, that has a certain price tag. If people are willing to wait 15 years, that has a lower price tag. You know, we're taking an existing pool of money and trying to spread it as evenly and thinly as possible over all of these projects to get them done in a reasonable amount of time. What is that reasonable amount of time? That will drive the amount of money we need per year to get the projects done. Let's talk real quickly about the funding opportunities to accomplish these goals. As the city of Topeka, we generally have two funding options: property tax through the mill levy and sales tax. And those are the only real things we're allowed to do according to state law. There's been a number of other communities that have tried different taxes and fees, and the majority of them have all been shot down by the Supreme Court. So we have two options, and we can mix and match from those two options to accomplish our funding goals. But at the end of the day, we've got these two things. One thing that a lot of people have brought up is an exemption on food and utilities. And while I believe the majority of the council would absolutely support not putting a sales tax on food, that's a state issue. That is not something that the council has the power to implement. Though I believe we would all support that, I would encourage you to contact your state representative to advocate for, let's not charge sales tax on food, because it does affect people that are struggling to buy those things. So what are we working on now? We've gotten a lot of feedback from the folks that Michelle mentioned and a number of other people, and we're truly grateful for that. We are working on a full report on the previous sales tax. What we've spent the money on, where, when it was spent, that sort of thing. So as you can imagine, that takes a little bit of time to put together, and plus, we're not quite done using that sales tax money. So that report is in development, and as soon as we get it done, we'll release it as quick as we can. Also, we're planning, trying to put together a comprehensive plan about what we would like to see. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Peak in just a minute to talk a little bit more about what that plan would look like. The city manager. But part of what we need to know from you all is the expectations for that plan. You know, we can put together a 10-year plan, but if you guys only want to do the funding mechanism to do a 12-year plan, then that's not gonna work. So what we really would like to do is, as we work to develop this plan, it's very fluid at this point, which is why we haven't just come out and said, here's our plan for how the next sales tax would be used if we get it. We need to know what is an expectation that you guys have for the amount of time to fix these. Is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? That will help us craft what we think we can do. So really, we would encourage you to share your feelings on that. And then I'd love to hear your funding ideas for this sort of thing. You know, this is a big, complex problem. If you have ideas on how to shuffle money around to accomplish this without raising taxes or renewing taxes, I'd love to hear it. So far, I haven't found anything besides this as the option to accomplish these goals, but I'm only one person. So, you know, in my business, when I need another set of eyeballs, I call them and say, you know, give me a second opinion, give me a second look. So if you have ideas on how to accomplish these goals, absolutely would love to hear them. I will give you a fair warning, though. If you have an idea for funding something, I'm going to expect you to tell me where that money comes from. I'm going to ask that, because when we look at, you know, do we pull money from project A to put on project B, we have to know that. We have to be able to balance the budget and move money around. So we will ask where you think that money should come from. With that, I'll turn it over to the city manager for his comments. And again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. For me, when we look at it, we've been looking at what streets need to be done for quite a while. And you look at the 10-year CIP, there's a list of streets that we are looking at right now already for anticipation if the half-cent sales tax at least were to continue. So we have a good idea of what streets we know need attention and in what order. So we already have a very, very good idea of how we'll proceed in that respect. Obviously, new ideas and advancing those streets for construction would be done if the 3/4 cent were approved. That additional $7 million might do anywhere from another 2 to 3 projects, depending on what type of projects there were. If the language is changed, though, that also includes doing streets and, say, widening them or adding sidewalk or adding drainage to those, that can change the picture as well regarding how far that money will go. Adding those things make for a better end product, but they also cost additional money, and so we have to be aware that the additional increase, if we did 3/4 cent, would allow us to do more of those types of streets and that type of construction, but our dollars won't go as far. And so then that becomes the priority that we need to look at, is changing the PCI index, looking at the existing streets, more important than making sure that we have a finished product that's better for a neighborhood as we go in. We can modify that from time to time. We use existing funds from other areas to help do that in certain neighborhoods when we do a half-cent sales tax project. For us, it's really a matter of when certain things get done. We have identified from the PCI index the work that was done, and Dr. P can go in more detail of how he does the determination on what street. But that provides us the information we need as to where we're going to do work, and it makes it a very scientific process. That's why you see the streets that we have on there. Two things enter into the streets where they're at within the budget. A, what kind of condition they're in, and B, how much money is available from each year to year. We may identify that two projects have equal importance, but their price tag is too much for us to be able to do them within the same year. So one, even though it has equal importance, may get moved out a year. We have to choose which one's the best to do. So that's how we make the decisions that we do when we put the CIP together. And Dr. Peak, I don't know if you have anything to add regarding that, or is...
Not at this time.
I just want to take a quick minute to publicly thank you, Dr. Peak, for all of your work. I mean, this is absolutely one of the most critical things for the city, and one of the hardest jobs, is to try and sort of how to dig us out of this ginormous hole. And there's a ton of pressure on you to get this done and to get it right. And I just want everyone to know how hard this gentleman works to do the best he can to balance these resources across the incredible needs of our community. So, you know, it's very difficult to do. We have the right man for the job, and I thank you for your time and dedication to this, because it is a serious matter and you take it very seriously. Thank you.
The only other closing comments that I would have is that in the end, this is your budget. It's your city. We are not arbitrarily stating that we're going to impose a tax on you. We're saying that we're posing the question so that you all vote on it. I know that one of the biggest questions has been, have we considered the property tax impact that we would have if we were to address our property taxes? And if we're talking $7 million additional with a quarter cent, that would mean that it's a $7 million increase to the property tax. And we don't want to see that. Another of the questions that we have received is, you know, what would happen, you know, what's going to happen with the families that are struggling? Why are we looking at a sales tax? And this is one of the few ways that we could capture funds from individuals that are coming from outside of town and shopping here. We do understand that there is a concern for the food tax, and one of the first things that we did when we were talking about this was we did actually look. It wasn't just a, let's see, we actually looked with the state, and we got the information back that we could not exempt the food. But again, this is your budget, this is your city, and we're simply here to listen to your concerns as we're moving forward. And I want you to rest assured that your questions will be answered, and that we will proceed by listening to everything that you have to say. We will take copious notes, and then we will use that not only to provide more information to you, but as we're continuing our discussions in this process. So,
You want to see if, Jeff, do you have any comments you'd like to
Councilman?
add?
No, I'd like to hear what people think.
Wonderful.
And,
Wonderful.
you know,
Also want to point out that Mr. Lesser is in the audience this evening. So thank you, gentlemen, both for coming. We appreciate it. So with that, Mr. Hefner, Leo Hefner, if you'd like to kick us off, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll try to be brief. One of the things that you asked us about is the funding timeframe that we had in mind. I guess from my perspective, the funding timeframe that I had in mind was the last 10 years, because that original sales tax was sold to us as, here's a stopgap measure that we're going to have. We need to add this on to the original budget for the streets to get the job done.
Yes.
And where are we? You're telling us we have an F.
That's
Okay?
correct.
Here's some questions that I think need to be answered for the public before you proceed with a ballot on this thing. If you don't get enough money to fix the streets from the sales tax, why do you give millions of dollars away to go to Topeka? Go Topeka and economic development.
Well, let me stop you real quick right there. So that's the county-wide half-cent sales tax. This is the city-wide half-cent sales tax.
So you don't give anything to anything else but streets
So
with
this sales
this
tax
one.
is explicitly for street-related projects.
which means what? I'm skeptical, that's all
Well,
I'm going to
and
say.
so can I stop you real quick,
Sure.
and we'll have Dr. Peak answer that real quick?
Well, is my time?
No,
rolling?
your time will
Okay.
stop, so.
Sure. So the citywide retailer sales tax was based on the ballot language available for a couple of different things. One, repair and maintenance of existing streets, sidewalks, alleys, and actually streetlights were included in that language. And so,
Excuse me, could we speak louder towards the microphones? I have people saying that they can't hear.
Okay, so the citywide retailer sales tax had very specific ballot language about what it could be used. And that was basically our existing infrastructure for streets, sidewalks, alleys, and streetlights. And so since 2009, annually through the CIP process, we presented projects to the mayor and council in line with that specific ballot language for those expenditures.
Okay, I understand that, but all I'm saying is from a citizen standpoint, it all kind of blends together, and people start having those questions. Why is it going over here when we can't get the streets fixed?
Agreed.
Fair
Yep.
point.
Okay.
Yep.
Number two, so you might want to have some conversations with
And we
county
appreciate
people.
that feedback, absolutely.
Why do you waste money on those signs that say your tax dollars at work if you don't have enough money? I don't care if it's $1,000. That's that much more asphalt you could lay down on the streets.
Okay.
I don't know any citizen in this city who thinks that money rains down from heaven. They know it's tax money. So that's a waste of time and a
Okay.
waste of money.
Thank you.
There are other wastes that I've seen in the projects where they replace curbs that didn't need to be replaced. Why does it take so long to get projects done in Topeka? For example, the Wanamaker Road construction, the 2 construction seasons. Last spring in Johnson County, I travel a lot. I watched them do row from College Boulevard to 119th Street, 5 lanes. They did curbs, medians, pavement, the whole schmear, just like they did on Wanamaker. They started it the 1st of April. It was done by the 4th of July. Yet we take 2 construction seasons to do that. Why? There's that pathetic little strip they did out on 6th and Gage last year. I mean, and they're going to do 2 more blocks to Westchester this year. That's unbelievable to me. I spent a lot of time in a small town in California, a third the size of Topeka. I watched them do projects in 2 to 3 days that would take 2 to 3 months here. I mean, there's a big question there for me. Why do we only seem to do large rip out and replace projects? There are literally hundreds of small repair projects that could be done that would get the streets in better shape faster. Why do we see so many job sites with no workers for days on end? It seems that they open everything up so it looks like there's a whole lot of work going on, and then everything takes the whole construction season. And I'll stop with that, but my main question is, how did they ever get the streets done in the 60s and 70s when the sales tax was below 5%, and there was no special sales tax for streets? You know, we need to start using our budget for the core functions of government and stop spending it on other things, and then we'll get our streets done. And I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Mr. Hefner.
Thank you. So, Mr. Peak, do you have some comments on some of those? I know we can't go into, a ton of detail on some of that, but.
Sure. So just a couple of points. The 6th Street project between Gage and Fairlawn was planned as a 2-season project. The road work actually started last July. What started earlier was the utility work, and they've been working both ends of that project, basically from the east end and the west end, and the goal is to have that project complete this year. What I will tell you is in 2016, and I've said to council, we didn't have a good project management process for coordinating utilities. And so we've had a lot of meetings with our contractors, our utility partners, basically to improve our project delivery process. So, I mean, that's definitely something that I think we've seen marked improvement. As we've presented CIP information to the council, we've done a better job of getting projects bid out early. That's not always been the case, to give us that ample construction season to get things done. And that is on us as management to make sure that we get these. But I will tell you, a lot of these large projects are complicated. We have to coordinate our utility infrastructure. We have to provide access to businesses and residents. because we still have to have commerce going on. And so that can lengthen the time of projects while we're maintaining access to folks that need to live and work. The other piece I'd say, sometimes when you drive by a project and why is nothing going on, it could be the sequencing of construction. The utility lines, especially our water lines, when they go in, you put in new water line, there's a process where they have to chlorinate that line, basically so that they're making sure that the water that will flow through that will not be contaminated with bacteria. So during that sequencing, sometimes there can be a pause where there's not active work going on the site. Or if we do have issues, there may be a pause to make sure that we get things corrected and the contractor can progress in a normal fashion. We do have what are called liquidated damages assigned within all our contracts. So if a contractor does not finish within the scheduled time of the contract, there's a monetary deduct from their contract. So I think we have a lot of tools, and we're making vast improvements in our project delivery process. The other thing I'd say is, why are streets in the shape they are, and why don't, compared to a 1960s budget, it's interesting when I came to this community, did a lot of research at the library and the history room about what's going on. In 1874, the newspaper said one of the top 3 complaints in Topeka was potholes. So just from an engineering perspective, what I'll tell you is streets have a life cycle. They will always have potholes, but it's how do you manage those resources to achieve that best outcome? And that's what we spent a lot of time with mayor and council about, talking about a program goal. Not, having the first conversation of which street do you want fixed, but what is that overall goal for our entire city streets? And we talk about that as a pavement condition index. And then helping us allocate the resources. I agree with your comment about there's different types of strategies that we can do. The smaller work, what we call preventative maintenance. And that was a conversation we had with council last spring, the excess countywide. And I get that. It is confusing. We have a countywide sales tax, citywide sales tax, other funding sources. But we had additional revenue left over from the countywide, and we talked to the council about options for funding. And they programmed that for streets, and specifically for preventative maintenance activities. So last fall, we had the first implementation of that. Crack sealing is critical to preventing potholes from forming. I talk to people a lot about what we need to be doing on our streets is just like doing an oil change with your car. If we have that small investment in those preventative maintenance activities, we extend the life of our street and save us from those streets that ultimately have to be rebuilt. And so this year we're implementing that preventative maintenance. That'll take care of about 75 miles of streets this year with crack sealing and microsurfacing. If you think about the life of the 10 years of the citywide sales tax, it has had a heavy focus on full depth replacement and rehabilitation, that more intensive where we're ripping things up and putting it back. And over the life of that, we've tackled about 95 lane miles of streets, because that's how much it costs when you're talking about rebuilding a street. It's a very expensive endeavor. But if we're spending a little bit of dollars in these preventative maintenance activities, that's a better return on investment in helping us achieve our overall goal to improve the condition of city streets. So.
And I'll comment, nearly every time I talk to you, you have some exciting new thing to help prolong and help keep our good streets good, and go back and take the ones that they're not pristine, but they don't need to be completely torn out. This microservicing is a brand new thing that we haven't really talked about at the city in the past until you got here. So there are new and innovative things that we're trying to do to help address, some of those ideas you have, and how do we take what we have, improve it, and do proper maintenance and that sort of thing. So
I would just point out that other cities face those same challenges that you're talking about, and they seem to deal with them.
yes.
And I sincerely appreciate all of the comments that you had to say. I think that I wasn't here 10 years ago on the council. I got here 5 years ago on the council, and I've learned a lot in that process. And like everybody has said, the first comment that I heard when I was running for council district was, what's happening with our streets? And I think that it was interesting that when both you and I came on board, we kept on saying, we need a comprehensive plan. We need to understand what the total number is, because we keep on trying to put together whatever we have with the resources that we have available, and we're not really tackling the whole process. We hear the same concerns over and over. But here's what I want to remind us. I don't know exactly the total amount, but if memory serves me right, we received a significant allocation from the state at the time that that initial sales tax was originated. Is that true, Dr. Peak?
So we have had definitely more federal and state funding in the past than we're currently receiving.
So we had that state funding. In addition to that, I don't think any of us expected the economic downturn that we had, which limited our ability to also collect on those funds, which also impacted the state. What that ended up doing to us as a community while we were trying to manage those funds, the amount of maintenance that we were doing was deferred. By deferred maintenance, we also ended up using materials that were a little bit more inexpensive, which ended up being much more expensive in the end. The other thing that I think is a significant credit to, again, Dr. Peak, is that one of the biggest frustrations that we had in our community was that we had the money that we assessed for the first sales tax, and people would see a project occur. People were excited to see the project completed, and because there was not a comprehensive study to understand what was happening underground, we would fix a road, and then you would have a main break. And then people were very frustrated because we would have to go back to the same road that we repaired and have to dig into it, putting the money that we put to work to waste.
So why aren't we moving those mains into the easement and not under the roads, so that when the main breaks, we don't have to dig up the road?
Dr. Peak?
So a couple of things on that. So we do when we can, but you have to remember, we have to work within our right-of-way. So that's what the public you own. And to move that outside of that requires acquisition of property from property owners. I mean, that can be additional property costs. It also depends on what other utilities, AT&T, Kansas Gas, Westar, other people have facilities within that right-of-way. So it's really almost like a Tetris puzzle, trying to put all that stuff together underground and making a decision on cost, location, and project delivery, what makes the most sense.
So, again, thank you. I know that we're not probably addressing 100% of your questions, but our intent here today is to have a dialogue. Typically, when we're on the city council meeting, you go ahead and you express your concerns, and we have to look at you. I think it's wonderful that we have people here signed up to speak, and that you could ask these questions, and how great it is that you have real-time answers.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I don't want to monopolize things, but I could go on.
Well, please send us those. If you have additional comments or questions, we'd love to hear them, and we'll be glad to get you answers.
There was one I drove past tonight on the way.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments.
Yes.
We really appreciate them.
Mr. Larry Hinton?
Thank you. I might preface by saying that I've volunteered in the community a great deal, including being part of the pedestrian plan committee and currently the Complete Streets Committee. And I would urge people to do that, because you really see what the plans for the future are and what's happening, and have input through those venues. Obviously, our streets need to be fixed, improved, and enhanced. And there's many plans I know being made for the future for complete streets, multimodal transportation, and traffic calming. And that is all needed. The way people travel is changing, and our infrastructure needs to reflect that. And for any economic growth, keeping young people in the city, our city needs to be as good as the places they're looking at. And that's very important. I mean, a comment was made during the legislative session by a legislator that maybe the potholes on the highways will slow our children from leaving the state.
Oh.
And that certainly is not the philosophy we should be living by. I'd also like to say that in the years that I've been volunteering and working with projects, that the current planning and engineering staff are really great to work with. There's really been a dramatic increase in communication and the flow of information between the volunteers, the people from the community, and the staff. And they're always ready and willing to answer our questions and get back later with more information. I guess to sum up, we need streets to grow and keep the young people here that are going through our schools and looking for employment. We see the rim of the country being where all the development is, and obviously something needs to change on that. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you so
for your
much.
comments. Mr. Clark Trammell.
Good evening. I'm going to approach this a little differently than maybe what was said here, but picking up, I totally agree with what's been said. Is it Dr. Peak?
It's just Jason.
Well, I want you to know you're a bright guy, and I take to heart and listen to what you say, and I appreciate how you address the issues and respond to us. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to make some comments, and it's a business approach, but at the same time responding to some of what you all have said. And I'm not here to criticize anybody. I'm here to be part of a constructive conversation. But there are things I might say that I don't want anybody to back up on. It's just things that I believe should be considered in where the money comes from, how we spend the money, and how we go forward. I have been quoted in the past, and I will say it again, that, as it was said in the newspaper yesterday, Topekans are taxed out. And I want to address this from the tax perspective, but before I do that, I want to say a couple of things. I want to make it clear, we want our roads to be good roads. We want our streets to look appropriate. We want to be able to move around the town and feel good about it without having to go to the automotive shop every other week to align your vehicle. Totally agree with that. That's not the criticism. The half-cent sales tax, I believe, should be renewed. I think it's appropriate, the way the budget's spent, the way the dollars come in. I think that is something that is needed, and that's the right place to collect it. I do not believe, and the majority of the small business people, which I talk to many, and individuals do not feel they can afford another increase in taxes. So we need to do more with less. Maybe where we get the money, and here's where I'm talking about not to offend anybody, is maybe we need to be more efficient within the operations of the city. Maybe there's...
Where are some places you would recommend efficiencies?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay, excellent.
Let me go forward. There is capacity in the organization called the city that maybe that's where we make up some of the dollars we need by efficiency of contracting. Maybe we should be letting contracts at the end of this year for the cooler months next year rather than expecting the road crews to be out there during the hot months. That makes no sense. So people don't work, or they aren't as effective in working, doing their job because it's just too damn hot outside. Maybe they ought to be out there in end of February, March, April, and May doing some of this work. I ask everybody here, including yourselves, why don't we see lights at night on construction jobs? I go to every other city, they work at night because it's cool, plus they can get the work done so traffic can flow. Not one person here can say they've seen a light at night on a construction job. I'm going to ask for a little more time because I've got a few things I want to share. That's important. So the question comes down, are we contracting effectively? I think that needs to be looked into. We've had 5 city managers in 10 years. Let's give Mr. Trout a chance to look at his organization and decide, all these wonderful people who we like, maybe they're stale. Maybe we need to have turnover in the organization, because I think anybody here could say private industry could step in and do this and would be a lot more effective at it than the way the city operates, and probably most cities, because of the ideology that people get when they go to work in the city, or they stay there that long. That's why city managers come and go every 5 to 10 years. That's why executives in trade associations come and go every 5 years or 10 years, because they need to renew the thought process. Times change, people change, energy changes. Maybe we're too comfortable in what we're doing. Maybe we need to be more demanding of the time and the talent we have. I don't know. I
Mr.
want to give this
Trammell?
gentleman a chance.
How much more time would you like?
I'd like 3 more minutes.
Three
please.
more minutes?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The tax problem, and Michelle, you mentioned this, and I'll say, we don't want to look back. Well, I'm sorry, but we need to look back so we know why we're here, where we are, and to assess what needs to be done to go forward. History is very important to any decision you make to go forward. Not to be critical, that's just the way it is.
I did say we need to learn from the past, absolutely. I just said we can't change it.
A regressive tax, Michelle, you mentioned this is a regressive tax. In terms of individual income and wealth, the regressive tax imposes a greater burden relative to resources on the poor than on the rich. There is an inverse relationship between the tax rate and the taxpayer's ability to pay. These taxes tend to reduce the tax burden of the people with higher ability to pay as they shift the relative burden increasingly to those with lower ability to pay. We have a very high tax structure in this state relative to everybody else. We're in the very high tier. Maybe we're running off more talent and more income by raising taxes than we're generating by raising taxes. Think about that. People are going other places to buy things. Hotel motels. People pay almost 18% additional tax to stay in a room here. We have zones where we add additional $1 here, $1 there. By the time you buy a pizza or a burger in certain places, you're going, my God, the tax is too expensive. I'm not coming back. That doesn't generate tax dollars because I'm not buying them anymore. I'm going to cook my own hamburgers at home. So tax is an issue. Tax is a real problem. You mentioned the food tax. I appreciate that because there's an article and there are articles about that. Tax and spend is not the way to deal with this. Food tax is high. However, it's part of the tax structure. So we have to consider that when we start talking about taxes. Now, I had a bunch more I was going to say, and I'll leave it at B, but what I would like to end with is we do need the half-cent sales tax. We do want our roads to get fixed and be appropriate, and we do need to expand what that tax is to be spent for. If we're going to go out and fix a road, let's fix everything around it. Let's not come back and spend the money and recontract again. I think that's important. I think those two things are definitely should be done. Increase in taxes, absolutely not.
So if we take a look at our operation and it is running as efficiently as possible, and I'm not necessarily saying it is or it isn't at this point, but if we take a look at it and it is as efficiently as possible, and we renew just the half-cent sales tax as it is, you would support it taking longer to get the roads up to what we would consider acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
That's fine.
I think
It's
there
not a
are
bad
things.
answer.
No, but the answer is, I don't know how you're picking projects and where we go and where we don't go, like this gentleman was saying. I know when we did downtown, the ideology was, let's do as much as we can and get it done quickly. You go down and talk to any of you got an office downtown, or they were very unhappy. We lost and could have lost a lot of good people who had one business dug into their pocket $50 grand to stay alive while we tore up all the streets where nobody could park and get to their business. Maybe we need to think about how we're planning our projects and when we're doing the contract work. Sometimes, and you remember this, I said this at the last meeting, sometimes the best contract, the lowest contract, is not the best contract.
No.
Maybe we pay a little more, but we get a lot more. I think it's just being smart the way we do things. I think it's being smart how we plan things. And I think we can get a lot more street work done just by that. That would get us, you and me, at the same point at the table saying, this is acceptable because we are moving forward. What I do like is we are addressing it, and we're going to address it with effective people that can do something, because this didn't happen overnight. And it's inexcusable it happened at all. Expo Center didn't happen overnight. So let's get on it and do it the right way you said. And the last thing I'll say is, Michelle, you mentioned that this is our money. It is. But the point is, you all are managing the decisions of our money. The credibility has to sit here with the city. Right now, it's not there. And that's one of the reasons why probably an increase in taxes won't pass, even if you want to try it, is because until you build credibility that you're spending our money effectively and efficiently, people aren't going to vote for it. I think you're building that credibility, but we got a ways to go. Thank you all.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
comments. Spencer?
Mr. Duncan. And if anybody wants to speak and hasn't signed up, just let me know, and after we run through the list, we'll give everybody a shot.
Shanae?
So here's the good news. I'm not a no vote on what you're proposing. The bad news is I'm not quite a yes vote either. And so one of the reasons I wanted to come here tonight was, while I only speak for myself, I think I hope some of the things I express are what I hear out there also. Some of the things people would like to hear before they go and cast this yes vote or help you craft the plan. Because I can get there, I want to. I understand the importance of these dollars and what it means to us if we don't have them in terms of coming out of the budget and where we find the other dollars. I'm very aware of what the impact of that could be. Like Councilman Jensen, I don't want to go back in time either, but I have a caveat. We're in the 8.5 year of this plan, and the reality is half of our current elected officials have been here for half or more of this plan. So while they weren't here when it was voted on, they have been the stewards of what has happened with this plan and had the ability to correct course, alter it, be a part of what happens next. And so now as some of those same elected officials tell us, hey, we're going to get it right, we promise the next 10 years, I want to believe you, but I need more than just words. I need some sort of action that shows, yes, we've been here for a while, some of us, and here's what we're going to do differently specifically, as opposed to more just the platitudes of trust us, we've learned our lesson. And so I think I'm glad to hear, and one of the two things that are important to me was, one, I'm glad to hear that there will be some sort of public accounting issued. I will say I'm confused why it would take too long, and one of the things that I hope happens with the next plan that doesn't seem to appear with this one was, every dollar that came in should have been dedicated solely in its own fund to the road projects that it was designated to. And all of that accounting and spending should have been done from that. As opposed to what seems to have happened is some mingling in terms of incorporating into the general fund and that budget. That's simplifying it a lot.
So let me ask you to clarify real quick there. So what you wanted was basically a list of streets we would have fixed with that money.
No. What I'm saying is, in other words, for example, if I went right now and said, I don't know what the math would be, again, simplifying, 8.5 years of tax collection, 0.5%. How do those dollars match up with what we've spent? Is it higher? Is it lower? I feel like we're having to go back and do a lot of that figuring out in math because we didn't sort of say, these are the funds that the voters said stay here for this period. There's no chance it can accidentally be mingled anywhere else. And I'm not saying that's happened, but it seems to me in accounting would be easier if we sort of had that direct correlation as opposed to sort of how it's been budgeted. That's all. And I think that would help, again, with the trust issue because I'll sit here and tell you as someone, half the stuff you hear about the roads is true and half of it is not. Okay, and I know that half the things we hear people say, you're kind of like, well, that's not exactly right. But one of the big ones, right or wrong, that I think we're asking you to show us is people are saying, and I think they're somewhat wrong, is that we don't think all those dollars were spent where they were supposed to. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm telling you that's something you're fighting against as you pitch this to the voters.
Well,
and have
it's
to
our
get some of that
obligation to
trust.
show you what we spent the money on.
Right. And so the second thing that I think needs to be, or would help the cause, is an actual detailed action plan from our city as to what's going to be different than it has been previously. And so some examples of what I would put in that. I would put an explanation of how project timelines are going to be determined. I would put an assurance that some dollars will be spent in areas not served by the previous plan. I'd like to see a general outline of how the new plan will actually differ from the current plan. Some actual things you can say, this is literally what we're doing differently. An explanation of how materials used will be improved so the projects last longer. A plan regarding how the city will work with contractors to ensure jobs are completed in a timely manner, whatever those incentives, disincentives, or those things are. An assurance that dollars collected will be used exclusively for what we vote, whatever that wording looks like at the end. And a plan regarding how the city will improve coordination with utility companies. I mean, I'll end with this. I live over off of Wanamaker, and I saw two things in the last year. One, we all know about the Cox poll, right? Okay, we won't revisit that one, and sort of what a cluster that was. But I sat there as they finished the road not too long ago, picked up all the cones, we thought the project was done, and then they came back and said, yeah, we still have to fix this pipe. And they tore up the street that every night I drove by and watched them working on, fixing a pipe that I think they knew needed fixed the first time around. Now, how that happened it's okay, but those are the things people see, and even myself, who want to be with you, who say, how does that happen? I just don't understand. So I think some of those assurances moving forward would help folks like me get to where you need me to be with the city.
Thank you very much for your
Yes, thank you.
comments.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think that, first of all, I appreciate every single thing that you said, Spencer, and most importantly, I appreciate the asking how we're going to make this different. And the one credit that I will give all the council members that have been on the body has been that the big difference is that we have now finally a number that we've been pushing for, a total number of what it would cost for us to get the roads to where we need to be, so that we have an actual plan and an understanding of what the condition is of our roads, so that now we can start moving forward. But you're absolutely right. We have a lot that we would like to explain to you, and we will. One of the things that Dr. Peak and I were talking about was all of the funds that go into roads, but we don't know exactly how much went into like the curbs and how much went into maintenance and things like that. And that will be very easily solved by showing a chart that tells you the total amount of money that we received, plus where, like in categories, where those things were at. So we're working on that, and we will start providing that information, so thank you for those. Webb Garling House.
Webb Garley House.
Shanae Helm. And I don't know his name.
Thank you for holding this. Appreciate the opportunity to address the group.
It's our pleasure.
Until about 10 years ago, street maintenance construction in Topeka was paid for through the normal budget process, supported, I believe, through our property taxes. As I recall, the annual budget for this expense was in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 million per year. Okay? The citizens 10 years ago were concerned, or 8.5 years ago, were concerned about the condition of our streets. So we voted a 1/2 cent sales tax. Good for us. We want results. We voted a separate 1/2 cent sales tax for something else. Some portion of that, as I recall, goes toward streets or gutters, curbs, alleys, and that type of stuff. So, if my math is correct and my understanding is correct, a 1/2 cent sales tax will generate about $17 million a year. So we're spending that $17 million plus what we were used to be spending on the normal budget process, which was between 10 and 15 million. Let's call it 12.5. And some unknown amount from that other sales tax initiative. So there's $30 to $35 million that ought to be being spent on roads. That's a fair chunk of change. In spite of this investment, our roads aren't getting any better, as you've already said. I'm not opposed to spending money and getting results, but I don't believe we're getting results. When the 1/2 cent sales tax was proposed, I believe it was done by saying it would last for 10 years, and at the end of 10 years, everything would be good and the sales tax would go away. Well, here you are. We're back to the voters to ask to extend that sales tax and to increase it. This troubles me. It seems to me we have a problem building and maintaining roads in Topeka. Just about 5 years ago, as I recall, we rebuilt Topeka Boulevard. Just the other day, within a week, I was driving down to Topeka Boulevard from 10th Street to Huntoon. I looked down at the pavement, and there are huge gaps in all of the
joints.
Joints, yes, thank you. So it would seem to me that we have a problem in Topeka. Either we don't know how to build roads or we don't know how to take care of them. Now, we spent a lot of money on them, and I understand the staff now is really trying to get on top of this, but there's a credibility problem. As a voter, you say the problem is solved. 5 years ago, we were told, well, it was the wrong aggregate. Now, this year, we're not painting the right stuff on to preserve them. What's it going to be 5 years from now? Why don't we hire somebody to come in as a consultant and tell us how to build roads and how to maintain them? Other cities have good roads. We don't. There's a problem here.
Well, can we stop you just a second and break some of your comments down? You want to talk about the $30 million real quick, the budgetary aspect of it, and then move on to...
A couple of things. So, when I looked at the research prior to the sales tax, the general obligation bond is our primary funding source, which comes from property tax. We averaged about We averaged about $4.1 million annually from prior to 2009 for the general fund related to street projects. The sales tax, the half-cent citywide, the one we're talking about tonight, has averaged about $14 million annually in revenue for street work. So we didn't have that prior. So budget-wise, I think we definitely had less than what we've had with the citywide retailer sales tax. I think when you talk about just the overall roads and issues, and part of what we've done internally as staff is talk about asset management. And I think when the 2009 sales tax was passed, there was a heavy focus on what projects, what roads are we going to do. And we had success with that. We've worked a lot on our arterial streets, our large streets, and we saw that pavement condition improve. But what you have to remember is streets have a life cycle. This is an ongoing issue. Excuse me, just let me finish, please.
No. Topeka Boulevard was just rebuilt 5 years ago. It's falling apart. 29th Street was rebuilt about 7 years ago. It's starting to fall apart.
So an arterial street, depending on a treatment, you're going to have major work to do on it in about 10 years. And that's just because of traffic loading. It's due to environmental factors, and you have to have a comprehensive maintenance program. I think in addition to that, as I understand, there was issues on a lot of these concrete streets with that aggregate that was used as a poor quality aggregate, and that's why we have a lot of that joint faulting that's going on there. And so that's a real issue.
Shouldn't we hire somebody to tell us how to build these things?
So a couple of other things to talk about there. So we do hire design engineers to do pavement designs, and what that looks at is what is the projected traffic loading over the life of that road, what's the underlying soil conditions, load-bearing capacity, and what's the best pavement design.
Whoever we've been using in the past, we should use somebody different in the future. I'm saying bring somebody in from the outside. Bring somebody in from Wichita or Lincoln or Lawrence or Manhattan. All these cities have good roads. We don't. What is the matter with us?
With respect, sir, I've driven most of those cities, and they all have the same problems we do.
So the other point I'd add is, I'm a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and we do an annual report card for the condition of the nation's infrastructure. And if you look across the nation's infrastructure for transportation, we're at a D. We're at a D nationwide. And so that, Topeka is no different. Not that that's a good thing, but I think communities across this country are struggling with this issue. And a lot of it is because we spend a lot of dollars on traffic capacity, widening to add lanes for congestion, and that comes at the loss of not having money to do a holistic maintenance program. And that's a balancing act. That's why we're here tonight, to kind of get this input. People want sidewalks. They want other things to those streets. The dollars we've laid out to council are focused on maintenance of pavement. And so when you want to add other things to that street funding cost, that takes away dollars from maintenance. And they definitely improve quality of life within the community and are important. But those are the trade-offs that we make, and I think that's part of why we're having this discussion tonight.
And one thing that I will add, I think that when we talk about the condition of our roads, we have to remember that even if we receive $12 million, one of the things that always takes me aback when they talk about it is that we have 800 miles.
Lane miles. Yeah.
Lane miles. So, and it takes $1 million, right, to take care of 1 mile?
Roughly, a ballpark. We have, it's actually 1,600 lane miles. I mean, if you want to take our inventory, it's one lane from Topeka all the way to San Diego. That's how much pavement we have in the city we're responsible for.
I will add that we are constantly looking for better ways to do things and better ways to build streets, because you're right, some of the things we've built haven't worked and they haven't been successful. And there's a myriad of reasons why.
And I'm not trying to be critical. Like I said, I don't mind spending the money, but let's get results.
Yeah.
And Mr. Garlinghouse, I hope that you heard from Dr. Peak that we do acknowledge that there have been faults. Dr. Peak is pretty new to our department in consideration, and a lot of the gaps that we have found, in all credit, have been found by him.
And we may have, the absolute best engineering staff in Topeka that any city could ever have. But you understand, from my perspective as a
Absolutely.
voter, there's a credibility
Absolutely.
problem.
And we absolutely get that. That's why we want to have.
That's why I'm suggesting
Yes.
bring in somebody from the outside.
Yes.
I'm not being critical of you or anybody in the city. I know we have very bright people here.
Well, and
But there's
quite
a problem.
honestly, that was the idea behind hiring him, was he is from the outside and has this other experience to bring to the community and help. And a lot of the initiatives that we're rolling out now are because of his outside experience. So you're absolutely right. We needed to bring in an expert and roll out a plan to solve these, and we've done that. And we are a long way from being finished. But you're spot on with your assessment of we need outside ideas. One of the things he's brought is this microsurfacing concept to help maintain some of the roads we have. They're in okay shape, but if we don't do something, are going to fall off a cliff. So you're absolutely right. We need to take a second look at a lot of this stuff, and that's what Dr. Peak is doing. It's taking a little while to do. One of the reasons we use outside engineering folks to design roads is because the private sector is more in tune to the new ideas that are coming down the pipe, the new materials we could use, the better processes, that sort of thing. So we lean on them to give us the absolute best that we can get. And, in the past, we haven't been able to leverage that as effectively as we think we are now. But absolutely, going forward, it's our intent to do the best we can to use the best materials and the best engineering available to build something that will last as long as our climate and traffic will allow. So you're spot on your comments, and I thank you greatly for bringing them to us.
Okay, one other question.
Yes, sir.
If we pass this sales tax this year, in 10 years, are we going to be asked to pass another sales tax?
Well, so that's part of what we're trying to sort out here is, what's the quality of roads the community wants? That has a price tag. And then the sales tax is expected to generate X amount of money. So if we take the quality of roads and that price tag and the amount of money we get from the sales tax and compare those, if they don't match up, then yes, we'll ask for additional time to complete the work, because we're trying to build the quality of roads that the community wants. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this sales tax will absolutely solve all the problems unless we set goals that are within what that sales tax will achieve. So our hope is that out of this, we get an idea of what the community wants, and then we'll tell you how long it's going to take. If you want every single street in the community to be in absolutely fantastic shape, that may be a 20-year plan. It may take us that long to get there.
Excuse me, but, the streets were, we had an F on the streets, 10 years ago. We have an F today. We've had 10 years of spending an awful lot of money on them.
Yes, sir.
They don't seem to have improved.
And so some of the comments I will tell you on that is, when we got into some of the streets, they needed a significantly larger amount of money to fix, and with the economic downturn we had, we earned a significant less amount of money than we were expecting. So we had less money to work with. The roads we got into were in much worse shape. So
Less
you're
money from the
correct.
state.
We got less money from the state. So you're right. We were not able to accomplish everything we had hoped we would be able to do with the previous sales tax. So yes, we did not meet the expectations that the community had, but there are a myriad of reasons why we didn't meet this.
I don't think the voters are interested in reasons or
Well, and
excuses.
part of what
It's
we
like-
need to do
it's
is-
like 21st Street and Auburn. Oh, that'll never happen again, until it did on 21st and Wanamaker.
Yeah, yeah. There are things we need to improve, and we need to do a better job of setting expectations as we go forward. You're absolutely correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for your
you.
comments.
Thank you
Appreciate it
so
very
much. The gentleman in the orange shirt, followed by Shanae. I'm so sorry, sir, I don't remember your name.
JR.
JR. And full disclosure, Councilmember Cohen and I will be heading out because we have another community engagement meeting to attend. Councilman Jensen will remain. This is being televised. I will continue to get the feedback that is happening tonight. And if I have to leave and kind of like skedaddle out, I just want to say thank you all for your comments. I so appreciate everything that you have to say.
I have a long-standing battle with this guy. I don't want to be on his TV show. I'm J.R. Campbell. I've been in this city since 6/6 of '66. So that's a long time. I spent 42 years working for the Kansas Department of Transportation. I worked on over 100 projects in this city, getting them under construction. Did not involve the construction of them themselves. When I first came to this city, I'm going to give you some 2-lane roads that are now 4-lane. McVicker at 29th. That hill was terrible in the wintertime. 2 lanes. And I think it had V ditches. California. South Kansas Avenue at 29th. You used to go down Kansas Avenue, had to go down to 29th, go a block west, and then go on further south. They built a new one there, so there's been an improvement there. The continuation of Kansas Avenue from 37th on to Topeka Boulevard, that was an improvement that I was involved with. Gage, Fairlawn were all 2-lane roads. Look at them now, they're 4-lane. They may not be in what everybody considers the best shape, but on the other hand, they were built for better conditions. I think I'll take a little exception with the Topeka Boulevard 5 years ago, because I know it was about 20 years ago when that whole section from 4th Street to 15th was built to 5 lanes. We stood there in the Docking State Office building and inspected it by looking down at it, but that didn't do any good. But they did have, as Jason has said, some bad concrete. The aggregate was bad. We didn't know it after it was built and it fell apart. The only project I would like to see, and I do not drive this street very much, is 17th from Adams to Wanamaker. It's a 2-lane. It does need some work. We'd like to see some money. I don't want to shoot the messengers, but we need to help the messengers to get us. I am for the extension. I am glad to see the people that are here that are speaking are not a part of the silent majority. Because you're a part of the silent majority, all you do is stand back and complain. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments.
We appreciate it.
Next person signed up to speak is Shanae. Ms. Elm?
Good evening. I think I'm going to be guilty of shifting the conversation here a little bit. I think we've been spending a lot of time talking about credibility and talking about kind of the history of what's happened and how we're going to change the trajectory. I'm concerned about some of those things, but a few disclaimers. Number one, I'm not sure where the camp is going to be on my comments. I do know some folks who are in my camp that are working right now that stayed home because their kids are young and they didn't want them running around this room. Folks who just feel like they don't have a voice and that coming here may not mean much. That's my camp. That's where I'm coming from. I think it's my understanding, and I'm not an expert on city budgets by any means, that this is considered one of those core functions. Have a lot of conversation about, focusing on the core functions. And so when we're discussing things like sales tax, that we should have an opportunity to be discussing special needs, special tax, special needs. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, due to decisions that were made some time ago, that's not the case right now. This community got behind a big push for street repairs and painfully watched cone after cone as the time passed, right? We all want new streets, we all want better streets, and yet the construction is a terrible nuisance to our commutes. So it's kind of like darned if you do, darned if you don't, right? But at the end of the day, we know that we're gonna need the streets. So I've pretty much accepted that we're gonna be paying for streets at least until I retire. That's a long way to go. It's kind of like the car payment situation. I think I'm going to pay my car off, and then all of a sudden I want something new, or something tragic happens, and you have to go with it. So at this point, I don't think I'm even looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. This is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. The streets are just going to have to go as they go. It's stressful. It's frustrating. I think there should be better accountability within the department that is managing the projects. Project management, it seems like, is really where the improvement is going to be. I'd like to see all that happen. But I can tell you that in the circles that I run in, this tax does not have the popular vote. Folks are disillusioned and feel that we should be a lot further than we are now. And whether that's true or not, there may be data and stories that staff can tell us, but I've been in meetings with most of you and some of the others who aren't here, and we've had that conversation about how perception trumps reality.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick?
Sure.
So so they're not seeing the progress we've made. Is that because the progress hasn't happened in their neighborhood, or because they don't generally because they don't travel to the areas where we have done that, or they were expecting more projects to be completed?
I think people expected more to be done by now.
Okay.
And I think that people are, since they see a lengthy time in one place, I mean, some of the things that have already been said,
Sure.
all of those things create this perception that we are not being efficient. So it is that enough hasn't been seen actually completed, that there's cones in the same place for extremely long periods of time. No workers out there when we drive by. Those are the we're driving to, out to eat to Chili's, and
Sure.
we're like, why isn't no one out there? It's kind of a game now, honestly. So
Is that because we haven't done a good job of explaining the process, or telling the story about why or how a project is completed, or what is, in your opinion, is the reason for that?
I think maybe transparency about where the plan should be versus where it is.
Okay.
I don't think people have a clear picture of where even the goal 10 years ago or 8.5 years ago of where we're supposed to be now.
Okay.
A side-by-side comparison might help people understand, oh, well, we voted for this plan.
Okay.
Even whether we like it or not, right? And so I think people are lost.
Sure.
They don't know where we're supposed to be, and so it feels like we're in despair, like we're way far away.
How could we communicate that to those folks? If we give them information, is there a concern that the information we're putting out is incredible, or is it just a matter of we don't put it out in the way that they can get a hold of it? Or is it both?
I think both.
Okay.
I think that people don't go looking for the information because
Understood.
they're at work right now.
Sure.
Or they're dealing with their kids, or they're overwhelmed. I mean, I'm talking about a set of issues that I'm just going to be I'm going to be stereotypical for a minute and say that a lot of people in this room maybe don't have to worry about. And so it's I think that on the part of some people, they've stopped searching for the information, which is a bigger problem for all of us to deal with. But then I'll be frank, there are sometimes that something's happening at the city, and even I am like, oh snap, this is happening tomorrow. I don't know how that happens. I mean, I am a single mom, do work 55 hours a week. But sometimes even I'm like, oh snap, need to be at this. So I don't know. I don't know all the answers to that.
So how can we fix that? What can we do? How do we craft the information so that it's credible to those folks, that they understand it, and then how do we get it to them?
I would say, so just one small piece of action item, in layman's terms, back in this such and such year, because I wasn't here that year when we voted either, here are the things that we said were gonna be done in these 10 years, and here's a side-by-side picture of what has been done.
Okay.
Because at least, if as a governing body you can say, this is the plan that we passed, whether we like it or not, at least we have to deal with that.
And I can tell you, Shanae, that as I've been going to all the NIAs, the biggest concern that I've had of our neighborhoods and our people that are struggling, that may not, come to meetings like this, but will go to the NIAs, one of the biggest questions has been, I thought that we were going to get sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks. I thought that the ditch was going to be fixed and we were going to have a curb. That did not happen. I thought that we were going to have this road widened, and it didn't occur. And one of the things that, and I think that that is very valid, because when we were having that conversation, one of the things that we discussed was that when the vote was passed 10 years ago, the word existing was placed there. And it hindered the ability for individuals that thought that they were going to receive sidewalks, that they were going to have a dirt road, a gravel road turned into a permanent road, and different things that were expected were not the case. And that hurt. And I think that that's something else that we do have to be very open about, that there was an understanding that there were going to be additional repairs. And with the language saying the word existing, it has really created in our neighborhoods a sense of disenfranchisement that, you know, we thought that this was going to happen, and it happened. So let's talk offline.
Yeah, we need to say that out loud.
We do, and I'm happy to say it out loud. So we need to, I'm happy to work with you so that we could work to get that message out. So thank you.
And in a format that those folks can understand, because it's very important. I mean, we put tons of technical data out all the time. but
Absolutely. We have the portal.
Yeah.
Look at the Orange Barrel
Yep.
report. You
Yeah.
go
Have it on
online and
there.
every single thing is there. But the amount of data, and it's interesting, we are in a time in which we are trying to make as many informed decisions as we can with as much data as possible. The problem is that we often fall prey of victims of making sure that we take all this data and we're trying to present it out, but it's so much and it's so overwhelming that people can't sift through it. And people are trying to understand, but we're giving them so much
It's going right over their heads.
that it's too much. It's a lot. So absolutely.
So we need executive summaries in layman's terms.
I think even pictures, I'm just saying.
No,
I'm
that's
just being
wonderful.
real.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I have a little piece of something left.
Sure. No, please. Yes.
Because just from a different perspective, I think that this is an opportunity to move back to what we've been able to see communities do with these kinds of funds. So I think we're going to have to support our streets straight up, and it's going to be a long time. It's going to be more than 10 years. I think that's the reality. But I'm here to offer an approach for you to consider that might pique the ears of some folks in Topeka who may not be here tonight, okay? And that is to diversify this tax, to diversify its impact. Now, I personally am not interested in seeing another whole $14 million or more if you propose a raise to be dumped into streets. Like, that was the theme last year, years past, streets. I want to see our governing body throw another ball in the air. And it would just seem that this governing body can and should, given the circumstances of other topics that we've discussed, start to get serious about another cause. Not only that, but the sales tax does disproportionately affect people who are low to moderate income in a negative way. And if we're going to do that, if we're going to continue to impose this, then
Let me make one quick comment, though, on that, though. The alternative is property tax, which also disproportionately affects low-income people because it raises their rent. So, I mean, people, even if you're renting, you're owning, you pay property taxes regardless of whether you rent or own. So I appreciate everybody's comments about how the sales tax is regressive, but let's face it, folks, all taxes are regressive. No matter what we do, everybody pays a chunk of that. So I do appreciate that, but at the end of the day, that's why we've got to be so cognizant about the decisions we make with that money, because it affects people's lives significantly.
it does. And I think what I'm about to say could make a difference. All taxes do affect all people. That's absolutely true. But there's a lot of research to suggest that sales tax goes a long way. And all I'm saying is if you're going to affect somebody's grocery bill, we can at least get creative and set aside some dollars to increase their opportunities for safe and affordable housing. $1 million, as we just said, goes a mile for, what do you call it, or a lane mile, right? But $1 million and used in an effective way that can be discussed at a later date can provide 100 safe and affordable homes for 100 households in a year. So this is an opportunity to reach out and meet the needs of all Topekans. I think diversifying this tax opens this conversation up to a segment of people who would like to restore hope into their governing body. It's just an idea, and I think that it's one that we should give some thought to. Thank you.
So would you advocate to increase the sales tax to cover that $1 million for affordable housing?
I honestly, I think that we can spend 13 million on streets and $1 million on
So you
affordable
divert
housing.
money from streets to affordable housing. And
yeah.
it's not necessarily a bad
In
idea.
this
I'm just-
case,
okay.
in this
Okay.
10-year set, I would say
Okay.
yes, from my perspective as an individual.
Thank you so much for your comments. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So the gentleman in the Top Gun shirt, I apologize, I don't know your name. You mentioned you were interested in speaking?
Me? You talking to me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah,
So-
I like to talk.
Okay. Does anybody else want to make some comments? Yeah. Okay.
Marge Harris does.
Okay, Marge, and then sir, what's your name?
Me?
Yeah. David?
Wexler, W-E-X-L-E-R.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
I'm Leroy Joseph Wedeking. I've lived in the city of Topeka for more than a lifetime. Born and raised here. Sad part is I don't like about the whole thing is lying to people. I mean, when it was first brought up, it was the money is going for roads, nothing else. And it turns out it was going for the expo, it was going for
Well, and sir, let me stop you right there. That's the county-wide sales tax, not the city-wide.
No, that's what I don't like about lying. When it was brought up, it was said roads.
Yes, and
This
that's all
one
the
ci-
citywide
half a
tax ever
cent
went
was
to.
going to roads.
Yes, sir.
Not anything else. Nothing else.
Correct.
Instead, it went to the expo and everything else somebody could think of. Not the roads. That's why I'm against another sales tax, because it's not going to go right to the roads.
Well,
$45 million
let me
is
stop you.
going to go to fix up the expo.
That's a different
sad.
tax,
Let me
sir.
talk, please. You can talk right after I do.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be nice. Do not interrupt. The sad part is all the good roads that have been built lately. It's funny. It's been Lake Sherwood. All the roads out there going towards Lake Sherwood have been fixed. And that's the sad part. Lake Sherwood's got nice roads going out there. And it's sad. The last one I went to, they were fixing 45th Street up, which was only helping the people who are building houses out in that area. Because California was a rotten piece of crap at the time. I used to ride my bike out through that area, and I knew it, and I brought it up to the meeting they had over at the library. And at that time, there was people there from the expo, there was people there from that other place that's right by the expo, the Aquarius thing or whatever it is. And it's just sad that, we're deceived. We're saying all this money's going to roads. No, it's not. That's the biggest lie I think anybody can pull. And every other year we're hearing about, we're bringing this truck into town and we're going to spend $100,000 on this truck that's going to go around and check all the roads in town. We don't need a truck to show us that the roads are terrible. I mean, Lane Street from 16th to 15th is forming a nice little valley there. They were fixed 5 years ago. What the heck is this little valley in a brand new road? And you go farther on down the road where Dillon's used to be, the roads are all cracking up all the way down the road. These were new that's asphalt they put down. But they didn't do a very good job. Yeah, you're right. We can hire on a whole bunch of these guys, but if they're sitting at the building over there and they're not out on the street doing their job, then we're not going to have it. A friend of mine who is an engineer was out there when they were building 75 and they came to 45th Street, that bridge that's going over 45th Street. He goes, they're going to have trouble. This is going to drop. They didn't do it right. He knew it was screwed up, but the people that did it were in a hurry. They did a job. They got on down the road. A lot of these streets you're doing nowadays, they're falling apart quicker than you could say, well, we didn't do things right. You're right. And the people that were in charge that did it wrong shouldn't be here. What is this? My time's up?
Your time is up. I appreciate your comments. I do want to remind you, though, that we're talking about a different tax than the one you commented on.
Yeah, a tax is a tax no matter what you want to say.
And I understand that,
I mean,
but.
that's sad. That's sad. You say, well, it's different. No, it still takes money out of everybody.
It does,
Poor
and-
people's hands
Yep.
and everything else. It's just sad that you go by and say, well, it's not the same tax.
Well,
Yes, it is.
There are two different taxes, sir,
Yeah.
that we're discussing.
They all come out of our pocket.
Yes, sir, they do.
Yeah. Hi.
Thank you.
How are you this evening?
My name is Marge Arons. I live in central Topeka and pay city and county property and sales taxes. I understand that persons living in Shawnee County outside city limits do not pay city property taxes, which go towards city infrastructure repair. But most of those residents gain their incomes from city jobs and use city streets continuously. To make all city and county residents pay a fair share for the upkeep of streets on which they may drive daily, the city has chosen to require a sales tax from all who shop or use services in the city of Topeka. I see this tax as a kind of policy manipulation that avoids the difficult work of the city and county honestly confronting together the injustice at hand, including the subsidization of county infrastructure by the city and the working out of a reasonable and ethical funding solution together. My objection to continuation of the Topeka sales tax for infrastructure comes out of the larger picture of city, county, and Go Topeka tax funding issues, which this gentleman is referring to, and my understanding of the unlikelihood of the state sales tax on food decreasing or being eliminated in the near future. That tax is second in size only to the state of Mississippi. Ours is one of only 7 states in the nation even taxing food. When conducting a preliminary review of census data for 6 neighborhoods, including and near mine, I learned that 809 of 8,500 residents do not own a vehicle. Those residents will likely not be voting at sales tax election because they will not have a driver's license, the most common form of photo ID still needed to vote in Kansas. These same persons do not benefit from subsidies or incentives to businesses, which by definition are truly tax expenditures. Our local governments do not appear to analyze and report to their residents publicly and routinely the amounts and results of incentives to businesses.
Well, and ma'am, let me remind you that sales tax is not the one we're discussing tonight.
Please allow me to speak, Mr. Jensen. I have seen businesses invited to come here with generous subsidies, and I have seen them wave goodbye without a tear. I don't know which have to produce what to maintain an incentive over the state allowable 10 years. I have seen property tax and sales tax-free companies offer jobs that pay under a living wage. Taxes that get... We need to know what we are giving away, why, and the effects on those who pay sales and property taxes that go towards those incentives. Some of that is money that could fix our streets. In spite of the separation of city and county governments, they share a common public with 2/3 of county residents living in the city. All are county residents benefiting and hurting from income, housing, racial, and educational disparities wherever they exist, if all county residents living outside the city want to believe it or not. We do need to fix our streets, but because persons in poverty could pay a week or two worth of groceries a year with that 3/4 cent sales tax proposed for roads, and because they may have neither a vehicle or a vote, The community needs to think twice about renewal and continuation of the street tax and all local sales taxes. It needs to ask Topeka for a report on the use of their monies for salaries and assignments to be sure our public money is not paying for the Chamber of Commerce activities. The public and private uses might be difficult to differentiate. It needs to ask if the sales tax for economic development, in spite of its quick vote of renewal to a far-out date, delivers for the $75 million in public money already spent for such. Maybe that money is needed to fix streets or fund 501 to make it the most attractive school district in the state. I've just got one more paragraph.
Okay.
Let's look under every rock for existing public expenditures, including TIFs, and work together, city and county and Topeka, to create a better deal for all of our people, figuring out how to make up for long-term neglect of our infrastructure and planning for new. Thinking outside the box and the city, imagine what it could mean to economic development should we be able to advertise a lower sales tax in the 8% area than many communities with whom we compete. Thank you very much.
So I have some questions for you. As I announced earlier, if you have ideas, I'm going to ask you to justify them. So you don't support renewing the half-cent sales tax we have for city infrastructure, which I understand. So you would advocate to reallocate the countywide half-cent sales tax to the city streets. Is that what I'm understanding you're saying?
No, what I was saying is we give tax incentives. They amounted this year to $8 million to 10 corporations.
And that's generated by the countywide half-cent sales tax.
And that's generated by the countywide
half-cent sales tax. Yes, ma'am. That money goes to JADO, and then JADO allocates that to
No, I don't believe you're correct. I think you're not right. But we can explore that at a later time. I think not.
So where is...
It is not related to JADO.
Where do those tax incentives...
They are decided on by county and probably city governments too. I don't know, but I know that they are decided on at the county commission. And those businesses exist mostly, I believe, in the city. So
You're talking about property tax abatement?
And property tax, property taxes are not charged for very large corporations, and also sales taxes are not charged to many of them. There are tax exemptions across the board, and that's an example of what the public doesn't understand.
So you'd advocate for us not to provide at least the city's aspect of those incentives. Obviously, we can't do anything about what the county decides. They're different government.
No, I'm asking that you and the county look face to face and find some money. Don't take it from our most vulnerable, our poorest people, which the sales tax does.
So how would you envision that working? Would the county then sort of, just like they have with Parks and Recs, take over the roads for the city? Would you see us merging those departments?
I think that it's a matter of two governments working together for the benefit of all the people.
And we have done that through JADO in a limited capacity on some of the larger roads projects. So would you foresee that body being the one that sort of takes over that?
I think I think we have a lot of genius to approach this in a creative and fair manner with people working together.
And I appreciate that. I'm interested in your opinion of how that would actually work, though.
That will be the job of the good people working for the city of Topeka and the good people working for the county.
Okay.
We elected them.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Wexler?
My name is David Wexler. I live over just south of the shopping center on 21st and Wanamaker. And I'm in very much sympathy with everyone who's complaining about how long these projects take. I remember going to the meeting for the 21st and Wanamaker thing, and they said 21st from Arvonia, where I live, would be done 3 months for the one set of lanes and 3 months for the next set, and it was a year and a half before anything was finished. But I also want to say that I've lived in 4 cities, including Topeka. I've only been here 5-6 years, 3 before I got here. And of all the cities, at least on the west side of town, I admit the east side may be a little different, these have some of the best roads in the city that I've ever lived in. They're not always so smooth as I would like, but then again, maybe I would prefer them a little rough so people don't go 70 miles an hour on the city streets. They're not always as wide as I would like, but then again, I'm not using a bicycle on the road either. They're not quite as straight in some places. So when it's icy, I have to go very slow to not end up on the curb. But that's the way the streets came, and I don't think people want their houses ripped out to straighten things out. I think that people who've lived here all their life and drive on the city streets all their life don't realize what other cities are going through. I lived in Peoria, and I went down a main street on the northwest side of Peoria every day, and for 5 years, some part was under reconstruction. It is true everywhere. If you go and visit a city and go only to the commercial sections, particularly in the suburban sections of the city, for example, like my west area, you're not going to see the bad streets. You're going to only see the streets that the commercial people insist be in good shape, because that's where they make their money in the business. And I understand why that's done. And I'm sure that's done here also. The businesses, to some extent, insist that their areas be treated well because that's where the city will get its money. Nonetheless, this city is pretty good in many ways. I've been through a few pretty bad streets in this town, but they're relatively few on the area streets compared to the streets I've driven in other cities I've lived in. And that's what I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. Would anybody else like to speak? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. We have a couple of pages of notes that we've taken up here. So what we'll try and do is distill all your comments into a talking point. And then when the council actually brings this up for discussion, I will do a presentation and share all them in coordination with my colleagues over here. And this will form the basis of what the council uses to discuss what our goals are for streets and infrastructure in the community for the next 10 years. And then out of that, we'll attempt to distill how much it's going to cost, and then we'll talk about what the appropriate funding mechanism is for that. So I would encourage all of you to continue to stay involved and continue to share your thoughts and feelings as this conversation evolves. The council is going to talk about it. We'll kick out some ideas. I would absolutely love to hear your feedback on the ideas we come out with, your ideas for implementation of some of those topics we talk about. And we've got to build the community in the future. This is how we're going to do it. So thank you all for coming out. If you have any other thoughts or comments, please share them with us in the future. Have a wonderful evening. Sure.